Hey, welcome to Hope Rescue Podcast. Tim and Kimberly Scott, and we are going to start a whole new series. But before we dig into that, I want to read to you a review, and it comes from Imported 84.
Yeah, I'm curious about what that means. Like if they're from 1984, which I'm here for that because that's the year I graduated.
They were imported. I don't know what it means, but anyway, they know who they are.
Yeah.
The Scotts have a dynamic way of relating to one another on their podcast that keep me wanting to know what else they have to say. Oh, that's nice.
That is
but
nice.
It goes on. They strike a great balance between relevant and challenging topics and biblical theology on the same topics. The very difficult challenges they have faced, along with their honesty about their challenges, bring enormous credibility.
That's so sweet.
Yeah, I want to hear us.
Signed Mom and Dad.
Yeah, Mom and Dad. That's right. So we're going to dig into marriage. We actually came up with, think about this, the 30 top things, the top list of things that will make your marriage strong. 30.
Yeah.
And we're going to do it over the next several episodes.
Tim and Kimberly's tips of fun for marriage.
Tips of fun.
Something
so
like
we're going to get into that. And the first one is this, the three most important things in marriage. This is number one. Three most important things. Marriage.
I feel like we should play some Barry
Princess
White
Bride.
in the background.
No, that's Princess Bride.
Yeah.
Come on now.
I know, but with marriage, like a little Barry
Marriage.
White and, something like that would be good.
Yeah. Yeah, that's for later, I think. That's,
okay.
yes,
that's
okay.
when we talk about sex. My bad.
Here's the thing that the three things that you need to remember about marriage, and they are kind of three things that everybody, especially me, needs to know, and that is listen, listen, listen.
Yeah, that's
That's
good.
a bit of a problem for me.
Well,
I'm more of a verbal processor, and I talk when I should be listening, don't I?
well, yes.
Yes, quite a bit.
I feel like it should say listen, hear, listen, incline, and hear, because you can hear, like you can listen to someone but not really hear their heart.
Yeah.
So that can become like checking a box.
Yeah. So I think listening is getting inside of what they're saying, getting inside of their heart. And it's not just listening to what they say, it's listening to what they mean. So sometimes we say things, when we process it, I think what happens is we have a tendency to process it through our filter. And so we're making our spouse, in my case, my wife, say what I think she should be saying.
Yeah.
And, you got this little filter going on in your head. She goes, oh, you're going to wear that shirt. And that's what she actually said. That's what you actually said. But in my mind, I go, you are a worthless loser if you're going to wear that tattered up, beat up
In your
T-shirt.
mind, I'm putting the emphasis on the word that shirt. Like that shirt.
Well, you
Instead
did.
of, oh, you're wearing
You don't
that
criticize
shirt.
too much what I wear, but I mean, we need to be careful not to filter what our spouse says. If you want a strong marriage, you're going to have to listen to your wife or your husband. You're going to have to hear what they have to say. And here's the best, what I call active listening. Active listening is where you repeat what they say, not in an annoying way.
Not in an annoying way.
So you're saying. Let's go. Yeah. So it's this active listening where they know that you've heard what they say, and then you ask questions about what was said, and then you listen and just wait for your spouse to respond.
Yeah.
Because I have a tendency to just think I know what they're saying or what you're saying.
Yeah.
And I think you do that maybe a little bit.
I definitely do. I think it's human
you're
nature.
admitting it. Good.
Yeah, no, that's true for sure. I think you the tough part is in being a good listener is when you're taking in information, you're automatically thinking of what you want to say to that instead of fully hearing them express their complete thoughts. So
Dueling monologues.
That's
where you go. Dueling monologues, if you don't know about this, I talk about this all the time. We talk about it. And that is what you're in a conversation and you can't wait for the other person to shut up so you can say what you want to say.
Right.
That's dueling monologues. That's not communication.
That's like the talking heads on television where they have a manuscript and they're just waiting for their chance to say what they have to say. And nobody's really listening to each other. Yeah.
Or it may be that you will say after you've been talking for about 3 minutes, you go, are you listening to me, Tim?
Yeah.
That's happened.
Yes.
And
Because I
the
can tell
answer-
by your, I can tell when
That
you're like
blank look.
swiping through your phone or
Yeah.
you start
Hey, I took
checking out on
social
me.
media off my phone, by the
I
way.
know.
That was a new step of freedom.
Self-discipline.
Yeah.
I know. I'm really
But
proud of
listening, this active listening concept, some of you that are struggling with not feeling heard, and, we said this in previous podcasts and in preaching, we've talked about this, and that is that being heard is so much like being loved for most people that can't tell the difference.
Right. That's
And
so
it's
good.
I think it's really important, and I think that if you really love your spouse, you're going to actively listen. You're going to hear what they have to say, and then if you don't understand, you're going to ask questions. You're going to ask for clarification. Then you state what you want to say, and that interaction, we call it communication. I don't think that a real practical way of doing that is what I call active listening. So
What you
that's-
said I thought was powerful about the whole listening thing is being able to hear what they're saying and then ask questions about what they're saying.
exactly.
In other words, you're not stating your opinion about what was said. You continue to dive deeper into what they're trying to express to you. So
I love this. 1 Peter 3:7 talks about how the man is supposed to love his wife properly and so forth, and see her as a joint heir, because the Jewish custom was women weren't seen as equal to men. And he said that you should dwell with your wife in knowledge, and you should understand her. You should know your wife. And you are very authentic, and you're pretty transparent, and you're a great communicator. And if I'm not listening, you will
Call you out.
grab me by the collars and go, "Are you listening to me?
listen to me.
Look at me in the eye,
Yes.
young man." And then we, so we communicate, I think, pretty well. But it's really important to be able to process that and get inside of that. So our first thing is, here's our first of 30 that we'll give.
Not in
1
this
Peter
episode.
3:7. You're never going to know your wife if you're going to dwell with her in knowledge. You're never going to know your wife. Ladies, you're never going to know your husband unless you listen. So that's our first tip.
Yeah.
What's our
that's good.
second one?
The second one is learn to fight well. Fight for your marriage, not for yourself.
This is like
that's so
3
good.
podcasts right
Yeah,
there.
yeah.
We came up with these, and this is probably one of those at the top,
Yeah.
because when we first got together, and when people first get together, there's not a lot of fighting.
No,
It's a lot of you let stuff go that maybe would bother you later in life.
Yeah.
But then as you
You hide all your baggage.
Yeah, that's
You
right.
don't pull that stuff out till you're well into like year one.
Yeah. And then and that's when marriage really gets real, is you actually begin to feel that tension.
Right.
And not us, of course, because we're pastors. So we don't struggle
Yeah.
with, the normal things.
Right.
And nobody
Right.
believes that for a
Yeah,
minute,
not for a hot
especially you. Anyway, but if you there's an old saying, if you take a club to each other, you will destroy each other. However, if you take a club to your problems, you will destroy the problem and save the marriage. I know it's an old saying because I said it probably 40 years ago, first
That's
time.
so good.
But-
That you were the one that came up with that?
Yeah, I
quote?
came up with that.
Oh, that's good,
And this
Tim.
idea that I think what we do is we fight each other, and we're not in this together like we
Right.
should be.
As a team
Yeah.
against the issue. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's actually a really good point. We need to make marriage about we and not I. So if the driver of the marriage is I'm sorry, I can't read this.
If the driver of the marriage is you
Oh,
are
you're
looking for your
a
personal win and not the marriage win.
Right. So
Those
if
are
it's
so
all
good, we
about
can
me-
read them
I
together.
know. I was like, wait a minute, something's not right here.
Yeah. So it's this idea of the I. This
Yes.
is and I struggle with that. This idea that my part of the marriage is about me, but my part of the marriage is not about me. My part of the marriage is about we.
Right.
And your part of the marriage is not about the I, the
Right.
you, in as I refer to it, but it is the we.
Yes.
If you can get away from this idea that marriage will be best when I have all my needs met. So think about that driver. That driver says to your spouse, And many of you are living this right now. It says to your spouse, I am a person that needs you to meet all of my needs. Now, my job is to meet your needs the best I can.
The best we can.
But my job is not to ensure that you meet all of my needs. I need to create the environment where you might want to meet my needs, and you do, by the way. But the thing that I think a lot of people do is they enter into marriage, and fighting becomes about asserting your will against your spouse's will. If you go with that, I promise you, you will struggle throughout your whole marriage. You've got to see the we over the I.
Absolutely.
That's what we meant by that. And you know, that's the lifelong challenge.
It is. And to be fair, fighting is normal in marriage. I think, you know, if you're not having conflict, I say fighting seems like an extreme term, but if you're not having conflict, you're not really in a relationship with someone. Because I've heard people say, I never fought with my spouse, whatever. I'm like, how is that even possible?
That means somebody is not thinking or saying
or
what they really think.
Completely checked out and passive, which isn't healthy either. So
you got to have conflict. We're two adult human beings trying to get, but you can do it in a way that is helpful. Every day, this is how you can tell whether or not you are fighting properly. Every day, give your spouse a win. Now, think about this. Intuitive to me is for me to get the win. And I struggle with that. Do you struggle with that at all?
I think it might. Yes, there are definitely times when I want to win, especially when it comes to vocabulary contests with you.
Which you did, and we all know about that. But we had that last time.
Yes. But
21-16.
I think I will say by nature I'm less competitive, and maybe that is more of a man thing.
Could be.
Not exclusively, obviously, but I think that it's more of a masculine thing to want to be the winner. And so, but I do think there is within each of us, regardless if you're a woman or a man, you want to have your say, you want to have an end goal, you have something you're going for in this, and if you feel like you're not getting it, then you don't feel like a winner. So how to go about getting the win in a healthy way for both of you is what's key.
Do you need a win? That's the thing. A win could be a loss of relationship. And a loss of intimacy in the moment. So you win. And I am competitive, and the older I get, the less competitive I am. But that doesn't make me more secure all the time. And so insecurity drives a need to win. And if you're in a marriage where you're seeking that win, the real problem will be that means that your spouse has to lose. And if your spouse loses and you win, you don't have a win together.
You've lost. So the key is to disagree fairly. Don't make it about who is right or who is wrong. So that's the win right there is not making about who's right and wrong, who's winning and losing. It's about being able to disagree fairly. What does that look like, though? How do you disagree fairly?
Do you feel like you are right more often than me? Because I feel like you are right more often than me.
I will be honest with you that
here we go. You're not going to give me a win here. I can feel it.
I think yes, I do think I'm probably more right more often than you are.
And it's true. I always like about halfway through an argument, and this is what we're talking about is learn to fight fairly. But about halfway through the argument, I realize I'm wrong, and yet I don't want to give up. So that's not good.
So, but I have to own my part in that I don't think that's actually, I think that's prideful to think that you're always right.
No, I don't think you're always right. I mean,
I know, but I'm saying if the majority of the conversations I go away thinking like, oh yeah, I'm whatever. He can feel some kind of way, but I'm still right. Well, then I need to put myself in check too, because that's not healthy and that's not correct either. That's not a win for both of us. So the best thing to do is walk away from that or be able to sit down together and resolve where are you right? Where am I right? How can we enter into an agreement together about that?
We're pretty good at going after the fact. Maybe, after the fact going, I was wrong about this. We both are willing to do that.
Yeah.
The next thing about fighting fairly is keep focus on the issue at hand and don't bring in other issues to make your point. This is so common, and that is you're arguing about issue A, and you bring up issue B from a week ago, and you throw it into the conversation about A.
Or years ago is what happens
years
a lot.
ago, right? Or from another relationship, which is another topic, and we'll get into that.
Yeah.
But this idea, keep focus on issues at hand and don't bring in other issues to make your point. All of us have a tendency to do that. So.
Yeah. And don't use sweeping statements like "you always" or "you never do this" or "you."
That dramatic flair. I struggle with that.
Yeah.
I have a tendency.
Yeah.
I do it every time.
Big
See,
statements.
there it is.
Big statements. Yeah.
Using exaggeration.
Right.
For
it's not helpful.
Hyperbole.
Yeah, it's not helpful. And what it does is it actually diminishes the point you're making when you give it that kind of a grand scale.
Yeah.
Then it's sort of like for the other person, you just already have wiped it off the plate. Like, well, we're not even dealing with the real issue here. So,
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So the last thing we wrote down about learning to fight well is we came up with several things about it, but the last thing was this: the argument may actually be about your power and not
almost
the issue.
Always. Yeah.
I think that couples that are struggling with power, and I got to say something. I think that society, there's this tension between male and female. There's this gender tension. And whether you call it feminism or chauvinism or misogynist or misandry, which is hatred of men, misogynist, hatred of women. I think in relationship, we don't have those. We're not haters of women or haters of men. But in a married relationship, when it's about power or power-based arguments, it throws off logic.
Yeah.
So you can't listen logically if it's all about your power or your selfishness or fear of not being heard or fear of not being loved.
Respected.
That power is a really big problem. So our second thing of 30, this is going to be how many, we're going to have 30 of these, is this really important part of marriage is to fight fairly. And let's give them the third one. It's the third one.
The third one is learn to celebrate wins. That's so good. Go on coffee dates that have an agreement to not talk in terms of negative conversation or even things work related. These are some of the things we've learned, you guys.
Yeah.
This is for us. We hope it's for you too. It'll be helpful. So I think we've experienced our quote unquote romantic dates that have sunk like a ship, like the Titanic, have been the common denominators have been where we've gone into conversation about work topics or carried over tension from the day. So we're processing so much negativity. It's really hard to get unstuck from that and then suddenly shift gears into I love you and these are the reasons why. When and the tougher part is when you're in a partnership in marriage and in work possibly or in ministry for us, you can have different opinions on things, which also can cause conflict in those moments.
Yeah.
So one of the things we've talked about determining to do was to have less stress dates around like coffee where it's not so, or have a coffee date where you do process all the work stuff and then go to a dinner after that where we say, okay, now we're free processing all of that. Let's focus on each other. And even one of the things I was talking about that is a good idea is to be creative and actually look up questions you can ask your spouse about their feelings about things, just questions about some of their passions. And there's all kinds of things you can look up online to keep the date focused in a positive direction.
And make it sound spontaneous. Like you get your phone out and you go, do you like long walks on the beach?
Yeah. And for some folks who feel like, well, I've been married so long, I already know the answer. No, you don't. like if you haven't had those conversations in a long time, the point is that, like going back to number, what was it? The one about being heard. We all
Number
long
one.
to actually be heard and have an opportunity to share with our spouse our heart. But if you don't feel like you're getting that opportunity, you kind of feel like you're growing apart. So using those opportunities is pretty powerful.
Yeah, it is. And it's interesting that we have just recently been talking about that. So I'm going to be honest about this. I don't mean to paint myself as this bad person. I'm a pretty good husband.
You're
I
an
think.
amazing husband.
But I do tend to be a little bit more power oriented. I do have a tendency to be more negative. And so even on a drive to a restaurant, I think of one anniversary where the drive
That was a
was
doozy.
so bad that I'm critical of everybody, and I am like critical of drivers. I don't know what it is. I think
because you're such a good
men
driver.
do this. I am the
She
worst.
says with tongue in cheek.
I'm not a good driver, but I'm critical of other drivers. I am considerate. If I know I messed up, I will wave it like.
So you cut them off and then you wave.
Well, if I cut them off, I don't cut them off on purpose.
Mm-hmm.
But people seem to be driving horribly around me, and I can't help myself but criticize. Well, I can help myself. We're on a date. We're going to, I remember we were on this date going to a nice restaurant, and the drive over there was a nightmare. And then when we got there, I was bugged about how quickly we were being seated. Then, what we were going to order. And it was just like, it was a disaster. And it's not the first time.
It
There have been
seemed
other
like it
times.
just kept getting worse.
Well, you remember that one that we went to, our favorite place,
Yeah.
and which we don't want to say where that is, but it's a long drive. We get there, and I had already got a little cranky,
Yeah.
and
Hangry. You were hangry.
I was hangry,
Yeah.
and I needed an appetizer.
Yeah.
Anyway, in my water glass was some chipped glass,
Broken glass.
broken glass. And I'm like, oh, okay, there it is.
Yeah.
And I just really bugged me.
Yeah.
And that was an anniversary.
It was.
That was horrible. I want to apologize
And then it just got worse.
on our podcast right
Yeah,
now.
that's okay.
So
babe. I've
we're
made you
gonna-
pay for that many
So
times
we only
over.
got to three of these. We only got to three of these, but we'll get into some more of these. We're going to come back and do several podcasts on marriage. We want you to understand that marriage is the best thing in your life. And if you don't do it well, it could become the worst thing in your life. So
and it's never too late to turn it around.
never
That's
is.
the
And
point.
we've watched several couples. We've dealt with several
And
couples.
we've been in our own funks.
Yeah,
I mean,
we've
we're
been in our
speaking
funks,
from
yeah.
our own,
Yeah.
places where we can get stuck. So
And you got to be, even if you're not self-aware, then you need to be willing to listen to your spouse and hear what he or she has to say. So you can fix some of those things, some of those defensiveness and immaturity, emotional issues that are maybe negatively affecting your marriage. So we're going to come back next week, and we're going to talk a little bit more about marriage, and we're going to talk about give our tips. We got 30. This could go on for months.
oh my
No,
gosh,
we
so
won't.
many
We
things to
promise
cover.
it won't go that long. But we want to give you these tips, things that we've learned. Hopefully, you are constantly in prayer with each other about the quality of your marriage. Thank you for listening to Hope Rescue Podcast. We love you, and do send those remarks. We'll read those on
give you a
air if we
shout
get
out.
an opportunity.
Yeah.
And God bless you. Have a great week.
Thanks, guys.